Last week we learned about all of the different ways to solve a quadratic equation. This week we'll focus on some of the applications of the quadratic equation. These all have to do with different applications related to geometry. So the first is that we have a space on our wall where we wish to put a fish tank. The width must be 18 inches. The length is twice the height decreased by 2. So what we have is we have a three-dimensional tank. They've told us that the width is 18 inches. We don't know the height and we don't know the length. So I'm going to let h equal the height. And since the length is twice the height decreased by 2, I'm going to call the length 2h minus 2. So if the height was h, then I would double it and then decrease it by 2 to find the length. We're talking about total volume here, and we know that the volume would be length times width times height. So now we're just going to plug in the values that we know. I know that the volume is 7,560 cubic inches. I know that the length is 2h minus 2, the width is 18, and the height is h. So here's my equation. Now notice that I've used only one variable. So I would not want to come in and use h for height and L for length, because there's no way to solve an equation with two variables unless you have two equations, in which case you could find where they cross, which is when you solve a system of equations. In this case though, notice I've used just one variable and I've set my second unknown in relationship to the unknown that I had to begin with. So now it's just a matter of doing the math. I'm going to multiply all of this out, so I'm going to take 18 times h and then distribute it to both terms. So 18h times 2h is 36h squared, and then 18h times minus 2 is minus 36h. I of course want everything on the same side of the equal sign, so I'm going to subtract the 7,560 over to the other side. And I don't like, oops, it's a minus. I don't like the fact that I've got these very, very large numbers to deal with, because that will make it hard to factor and even hard to use the quadratic formula. So I'm going to factor a 36 out of everything, and that gives me h squared minus h and minus 210 equal to 0. That makes it much easier. Now I'm looking for numbers that multiply to 210 that have a difference of 1, and that turns out to be 14 and 15. And so it's h minus 15, h plus 14, because they had different signs and the larger number was negative, which means setting each of these equal to 0, I would find that h is positive 15 and h is negative 14. Now, of course, this is a story problem, so it does not make sense to have a negative answer. So I know that h is 15. However, this asks for the dimensions of the tank. A little extra line in there. The dimensions of the tank would be h, which is 15 inches, by 18 inches, by 2h minus 2. So if h is 15, that's 2 times 15, which is 30, minus 2, or 28 inches. So those are the dimensions of the tank. Used in that same example, we know that the volume of the tank is 7,560 cubic inches, and 1 gallon of water, which is the same as 231 cubic inches, weighs 8.345 pounds. We're trying to find what's the weight of the water in our tank. So it makes sense that I'm going to turn this value, my volume, into gallons so that I could multiply that by how much a gallon weighs. So I'm going to take 7,560 cubic inches divided by, well, I'll just say over 1, and then I'll say times 231 cubic inches to 1 gallon. Now notice what will happen is that the inches cubed will cancel and my answer will be in gallons. dividing that, or multiplying and dividing, gives me an answer of 32.727, etc., repeating. Typically, I will leave that value in my calculator. Now I have gallons, and I know that each of those weighs 8.345 pounds, so that I'm going to multiply that times 8.345, and that should give me pounds. I end up with about 273.1 pounds. So that would be the answer to my question, is way too heavy for me to carry by myself. We have three sides of a right triangle, so never a bad idea to make yourself a little picture. Three sides of a right triangle are represented by three consecutive even integers. So consecutive meaning in a row. Integers meaning there's no fractions, decimals, etc. So if I say that x is the first integer, and they're even integers are 2 units apart. 2 to 4 would be 2 units apart. 4 to 6 is 2 units apart. So I'm going to say that x plus 2 is my second, and 2 more than x plus 2, which is x plus 4, is my third. Now I know in a right triangle the longest side is the hypotenuse. So this is x plus 4, and then it doesn't matter which one is x or x plus 2. Another thing I know about right triangles is that they use the Pythagorean theorem, which is leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. So x squared plus x plus 2 squared, those are the two legs, equals x plus 4 squared, and that's the Pythagorean theorem. So now I'm just going to, FOIL everything out. Remember, this is x squared. This is not x squared plus 4. What we do is we take x plus 2 times x plus 2 and FOIL it out. So that's what that means, is take that twice and then FOIL it out. So that would be x squared plus 2x plus 2x plus 4, which would of course be x squared plus 4x plus 4. Doing the same thing over here, I would get x squared plus 8x plus 16. And I need to get everything to one side. So I'm going to get rid of this x squared. I'm going to get rid of the 8x. I'm going to get rid of the 16. And on the right side, I just have 0, which is what I wanted. On the left side, I have x squared, I have minus 4x, and I have minus 12. This does happen to factor into x minus 6, x plus 2, which would give me my two solutions of x equals 6 and x equals negative 2. Again, the negative 2 would not make sense because we're talking about lengths, and I couldn't have a length of negative 2. So the integers are 6, and then x plus 2 would be 8, and x plus 4 would be 10. So the lengths of the triangle are 6, 8, and 10. They don't specify if they're inches or feet, etc., but those are the integers used for the lengths of the triangle. This one's having to do with the circle. So we have a clock face and the minute hand, which of course is the long one. When it goes all the way around, it covers an area of 200 square inches, which is them telling us that the area of the circle is 200 square inches. They're asking what is the length of the minute hand. So the minute hand is the whole length of the clock from the center, which of course is a radius. So essentially they're saying, here's the area, find the radius. We know that the area of a circle is pi r squared, so that's the formula we will use. They give us that the area is 200. Pi, we're just going to use 3.14. And radius squared, we don't know. I'll divide each side by 3.14, which of course will give me r squared all by itself over here. On this side, I get 63.69, etc. I leave that entire decimal in my calculator, and then I will take the square root of it. And that gives me, rounded to the nearest whole inch, about 8 inches. So about 8 inches would be the radius, a little bit less than 8. Here's an ice cream shop. He wants a very large ice cream for his sign, but the county says make sure that it's not taller than 15 feet. So our job is to determine if he can have this ice cream cone based on all of the information they've given us in the question. So the sign needs to be big. The height of the bottom triangle is 3 times the height of the semicircle on top. So if this distance, which is of course the radius, would be x, then this distance would be 3x because it would be 3 times the height of the smaller. And of course, this distance all the way across would be 2x because it would be 2 radii. So now we have everything we need to figure out the area, or to figure out the x's based on the total area of 74 square feet. So first, let's just look at the area of each of these parts of the figure. If I were to find the area of the figure, this is a semicircle, so half of a circle. A circle is pi r squared. I'm going to take half of that. A triangle is 1/2 times base times height. So that's how I'm going to find the area. And now I'm going to plug in the values that I know. Area is 74. 1/2 times 3.14 times r squared, which in our case is x squared. And then 1/2 times the base, which we said was 2x, times the height, which we said is 3x. So those are all of the values, and of course our only unknown is x. The left side is 74. The right side, I have 1.57 x squared plus 3x squared. Notice there's no x to the first value, so in this case I will not move the 74 over. I'm going to leave the 74 on the left. I'll combine like terms over here, so 4.57 x squared. I'll divide both sides by 4.57. That leaves me with x squared equals about 16.19. Again, I'll leave that decimal in my calculator, take the square root of each side, and get that x is about 4.02. I'm going to round that answer to the nearest foot, so I'm going to say it's about 4 feet. But the question says, can he put up his cone if x is 4? So if x is 4, then that means this distance is 4 and this distance is 12, leaving us with a total height of 4 plus 12, or 16 feet. They won't let us have anything taller than 15 feet, so no, sorry Morris, you can't have your sign. This last question is one for you to do on your own. This is one very similar to our last question. So press pause, try this question, and then press play to see how you did. Here we have basically a kite that's in a diamond shape. It tells us that the height of this smaller triangle is 3 feet. It tells us that the height of the lower triangle is 2 feet shorter than the length of the shared base. So let's call this shared base x. That's all the way across is x. The height of this triangle is 2 feet shorter than that. So this is going to be x minus 2. To find the area of this figure, I'd have to find the area of 2 different triangles. So the area, which they've told us is 36 square feet, is equal to 1/2 base times height of the smaller triangle. So the base is x, the height is 3. The area of the larger triangle is 1/2 base times height of the larger. So the base of the larger is x, and the height of the larger is x minus 2. From here, we're just going to do a lot of multiplication. I see that I've got a lot of 1/2s here. I don't love dealing with fractions, so a little trick on clearing fractions is to take each term by 2. So by doing that, on the left side, that just gives me 72. On the right side, that leaves me with the 1/2 and the 2 going away, giving me x times 3, or 3x. And then on this one, of course, the 1/2 and the 2 going away, giving me x squared minus 2x. So much, much easier than dealing with the 1/2s all the way through the question. This one does have an x squared and an x term, so everything's going to go to one side. meaning I'm going to subtract 72 from each side and do some rearranging. I have x squared, I have plus x because those two combine, and then I have the minus 72. Again, I'm always going to factor if I can. In this case, I can. X plus 9 and x minus 8. Those two values multiply to negative 72 with a difference of 1, which leaves me with an x of negative 9 and of positive 8. Of course, negative 9 does not make sense. I'm trying to find the base and the height of the lower triangle. So the base of the lower triangle is 8 feet, because that's the value of x. The height of the lower triangle is x minus 2, or 8 minus 2, which is 6 feet.